Okay, so thank you for joining our tools and techniques micro class. Can I please ask do we record the session, Z?
A recording in progress.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you so much. So our presentation is going to be 45 minutes long. You're welcome to post your questions on the Q&A box that is there, and we will share them with the presenter. The presentation will be uploaded on the IBACA YouTube page that is found in this link. Unfortunately, we will not be able to send the presentation deck, and you can become a member of the IIBA using this link. If you have any questions, please use this email, johannesburg@southafrica.iiba.org. Just a few member benefits is that you have access to our library featuring 11,000 titles, and you have exclusivity to the membership webinars. You have access to the PDFs, the articles, the industry papers, and the reports, and you have opportunities to connect with members at the local or international conferences, at our chapter events. You have access to the global community of business analysts, educators, thought leaders, mentors, and coaches. You save up to 40% on globally recognized certifications, and then you can get a discount on the conferences like the BA Summit that we held yesterday. Additionally, if you want to become a volunteer, you can scan the QR code that we have displayed at the moment. And while you're still scanning the QR code, I will share a bit about our presenter. Okay. So our presenter is Jacques Snyman. He's is a management consultant in mining, telecommunications, financial services, and manufacturing. And after attending C schools and obtaining a high school diploma from the Nido Aguilas International School in Santiago, Chile, um, Jacques was educated as an electronics engineer at the University of Pretoria, and he's obtained the Bachelor of Engineering in Electronics in 1989. He first worked as a junior electronics engineer, after which he pursued a career in mining as an electrical engineer. He has worked in both gold and platinum mining industries. After completing his military training, Jacques was appointed as a plant engineer to look after a smelter in Magaliesburg. He later joined Eskom as a senior electrical engineer and managed the control field services section at the then National PTM and C division at Simmerpen in Germiston. After completing his MBA degree at Wits Business School in 1998, he joined the consulting world. He consulted as an electrical engineer and worked at the SMME industry, assisting small enterprises not only to survive, but to thrive in their specific business endeavors. As a trusted advisor in numerous businesses, he also helped create and grow market franchise groups for a number of these clients. And then in 2002, Jacques started working at MEC Consulting, doing leadership development and change management for blue chip clients.
Hi, Petunia. I think we lost you. Can't hear you. Are you still there?
It was only me, Carrington. I'm glad to
I
hear.
think we lost Petunia. Carrington, if you can just continue, pick up where she left off, and then hand over to Jacques.
Okay, I can't see the screens that are displayed, but I think we can touch on the benefits of IIBA stuff later. I think Shaki, you're welcome to share your screen. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and then we kickstart the session.
Cool, thank you, Carrington, much appreciated. I'm going to share my screen. If somebody can just indicate to me that you can actually see it.
I'll confirm to you soon now. Please share.
Okay, that should be on its way. You should see it now.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yes, yeah, we can see your screen. Just give you a brief introduction. But I think Petunia did introduce yourself, gave a background, but if you think you need to add something, we'll give you 1 minute or so to warm up, and then you can kickstart your presentation.
I'll stick with the intro. I think it is long enough already. Guys, from my side, just thank you very much for the opportunity. It's an honor for me to talk to you guys tonight. The tool or the process that is referred to as the difficult conversations process is one of many tools that I share with groups when I do things like leadership development or the art of facilitation training course or team mastery and so forth. It's just that I found in the past that the kind of conversations we know we should have, we try to avoid or we avoid at all costs. And the only thing that happens in the end is that it's almost like a wound that festers. And in the end, it just becomes worse and worse. So I'd like to talk to you tonight about one possible way in which you can actually deal with difficult conversations. It's going to be participative, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So please just, guys, talk to me or make a comment. I'll see if I can somehow see the chat when I ask you questions. But just on the topic of difficult conversations, how would you guys define a difficult conversation? What is it? What is a difficult conversation? How would you characterize that?
I'll be helping to take responses, Shaq.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're welcome
if you
to raise
mind.
a hand. Yes, yeah. You can raise your hand, colleagues. If you want to give a response, give you an opportunity.
I can't see the chat, so if you can just channel that through to me, Carrington, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. Nosipo has raised a hand, but posted in the chat that this is uncomfortable conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uncomfortable conversations about what? What are the typical topics and who are the typical people that might be involved in a difficult conversation?
You may speak, Portia, if you, sorry, Nosipo, if you want to. I've allowed you to speak.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank
Hello,
you.
Portia.
It's Nasipo.
No,
Thank you.
it's actually
Is it
Nasipo.
Nasipo?
Go for it.
Yes.
Go for it, Nasipo.
So I think it just depends, right? I think like sometimes it's just maybe you're uncomfortable to have a conversation with your boss or maybe with a colleague. Something has happened that made you maybe uncomfortable and you don't know how to approach that subject, or yeah, that type of thing. I would say is a difficult conversation. So maybe things around some people are uncomfortable to speak maybe around increases, or if maybe their boss roles are not performing, that type of thing.
Right. Absolutely. So performance discussions, yeah, asking for a raise. Any other thoughts?
Maybe
I'll
can
go.
okay, you can go ahead.
Sorry, Carrington. I think from my side, what comes to mind is oftentimes where there is no clear process on how the questions are going to be dealt? Well, obviously that also touches on trust. So if, and I'll just give maybe a view around the workplace. So for instance, if it's a team setup or a squad, I function within squad within the project office. So for instance, if you find that in a typical squad, there isn't trust, that's where, in my view, it is very difficult for one to bring up any difficult topic, or also transparency in how the questions gets dealt, I guess maybe
Yeah.
from a leadership point of view.
Absolutely. So there's some risk in there, right? You're not sure what the outcome of that potential discussion could be.
Yep.
Cool. There was another comment, Carrington. I think you had a comment to make.
Yes, let me see. There's a comment from Nazima which says psychological unsafety.
Yeah, absolutely. Correct.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, guys, let me just give you a definition. It's an issue that I find difficult to share or to approach or to talk about, right? And clearly, we touched on it, Nana, there's a little bit of a risk to the relationship potentially. Okay, if I approach my boss and I indicate to him that I need a raise, there's a little bit of risk in terms of the relationship around there. Okay, it could be about sensitive themes, guys, like politics and religion and sport and all sorts of things like that, where you're not sure what's the other person's opinion or who he or she supports, and that could be sensitive as well. And if you just have that uneasy feeling inside of yourself, okay, it could also be confrontational discussions or discussions or conversations that either are in conflict or could lead to conflict. It threatens our comfort zone. And as you guys suggested now, you're not sure of what the outcome could be. So you kind of don't want to take your chances, right? So we're unsure of how this thing could end. Now, why are these conversations then difficult? Why do you guys think they are actually termed difficult conversations? If it's just something that you need to say or something you need to share, why would a conversation be classified as difficult? Anybody can respond.
Perhaps fear of the unknown in terms of the outcome, the consequences of that conversation.
Yeah, it could be. You don't know where this thing is going to end. Okay, any other thoughts? Why is a conversation termed or defined as a difficult conversation?
We have a comment from Margaret saying that a fear of the repercussions on what you have to say. And then another one is saying a fear of discriminations at times. And then another comment, intimidation by the seniors.
Yeah. Or even victimization afterwards, right?
Yes. And then Andila says that conversations may have impact on career progressions and opportunities. And then with Mbali says that it invokes anxiety in the receiver who brews resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% right. You're 100% right. So some of the reasons could be that we don't share necessarily in normal interaction with other people. We don't share easily, especially us men. We don't share how we feel specifically, and we surely don't share our process of thinking. And there it is. It's because we fear the consequences. We're uncertain about what could happen, and therefore I kind of skirt around this thing called a difficult conversation. We put it off, and we just never have that discussion, because sometimes the fundamental reason is that we fear the potential of conflict, and we don't want to, let's say in brackets, risk the relationship or risk the potential fallout from a discussion like that based on a relationship we've got. But the relationship might be a bit shaky, and that could also be a reason why we put this thing off. Okay. So I just want to start illustrating a little bit. And this really is the picture. So if you have a look at this, you need to agree with me that it can get messy, right? And the reason why difficult conversations is simply because there's always three stories involved, okay? There's my story, there's your story, and then there's the so-called third story, right? That somebody would piece together if this third person had to stand between you and I while we're having our discussion, okay? So that's the three so-called stories. There's my story, there's your story, and then there's the third story. But to just complicate matters a little bit further, every single one of those stories has got three aspects, three stories woven into it, every single one of those three, right? In terms of my story, for example, there's the what happened story for me, okay? So I've got my set of, in brackets, facts, if you want. I've got my emotions and feelings, right? And then there's certain issues in terms of my identity being challenged according to my story, right? But now remember, there's the what happened part, or the factual part, if you want, from the other person's story. There's the other person that's going through the emotions and feelings, and there's clearly something that could be attacking the identity of the other person as well. And now just to add insult to injury, if you sit on the side and look at two people having a difficult conversation, you will form that third story, and that third story also has got a what happened part, it's got an emotions and feelings part, and it's got an identity part. So difficult conversations are difficult because it's a complex matter, guys. It's that simple, all right? So the landscape is complex, and apart from that, there's a lot of risk involved in terms of taking on a difficult conversation. Okay, it's not about the facts, and it's not necessarily about who's right or wrong, but it is about the different meanings and interpretations that we each give that set of facts, right? It reminds me of the famous story where a couple of blind people were walking around an elephant, and somebody that could see were asking them, what is standing in front of you? One guy said it's a rope, the other guy said it's a fire hose, another guy said it's a leather couch, and so forth and so forth. All that implies is that everybody was looking at the same thing from a different perspective. So our meanings and interpretations that we've got are different. And that's why we have different views on that set of facts, if you want. And that comes from our values, our beliefs, and those things that we take for the truth in life. Okay. I'll get to what is called the iceberg model of how we think, feel, and make decisions in a little bit. But we never say how we think and feel. Okay, we don't typically share that in any conversation. That's something that happens within me, and that's my process, right? The process of decision-making, for example, is never only a rational process, it's always a rational, emotive process. As you think, and as the executive center, your prefrontal cortex kicks in and does the thinking for you, the rational part of the process, that invokes certain feelings and emotions inside of your body. So you always will have feelings when you have to make a decision, just as an interesting aside. Okay. All right. So let's say that you now know that you have to go and have a difficult conversation. Let me give you just two examples briefly, and I'll explore them a little bit further in a while. But let me give you a personal example, and let me give you a professional example. I started on a rather large long-term project a couple of years ago. And when I completed my first timesheet, and this might be very real for you guys as well, when I completed my first timesheet, I put the real hours that I spent on that project for that month on the timesheet, right? This thing was then thrown back at me, and this then led to a huge, conflictual discussion. And in the end, what I had to do is I had to go through this little process that I'm going to shortly discuss with you in terms of how do you have a difficult conversation. Luckily, it ended well, but that's one example from a professional perspective. The other example I want to share with you was my dear mother-in-law wanted to decide about the menu in my house for the upcoming Sunday family lunch at our house, right? And that just didn't go down well with me. So there was another difficult conversation that I had to go and have. Okay. So when do you typically have to go and have this difficult conversation? If you are of the opinion and if you are of the position that you want to learn what the other party's story is, right, then go and have that discussion. If you want to hear them express their views, their feelings, their perception, their perspective, if you want. Remember, I said just now that we have different perspectives, therefore we have different understandings of the same problem. And if you want to do problem solving with that person, if you want to improve that relationship, then go and have the discussion. When should you not have a difficult conversation? In the little bit of the preparation process, I will share with you what happened with me in terms of those two examples I gave you. But if you realize that the real conflict is inside of you, then maybe it's a good idea not to have that difficult conversation. Okay. If there is a better way, and again, you will get to know and understand this through your preparation. If there's a better way in which you can approach this issue, right, by changing your attitude, your approach, your viewpoint, your behavior, then rather consider that. Okay. And if your purpose is in terms of having this difficult conversation just simply doesn't make sense. If you want to get even, right? If you want to hit and run, if you just want to be nasty because somebody else was nasty to you in this difficult conversation, please don't have it, right? Because it's going to serve absolutely no purpose. If you have those purposes in having a difficult conversation, the chances of you wrecking that relationship are near 100%. Okay, so if your purposes don't make sense, then consider not having that difficult conversation. Okay, so here's the three stories again. There's my story, there's your story, his or her story, the other party's story, and then the third story, which is seen by a mediator or a third party sitting on the side. And then remember that every part of those stories has got the what happened story, the supposed facts story, the feelings story, and the identity story. Okay, so what's the what happened story all about? And what are some things that we just need to be aware of while we have our little factual story, the what happened story going off in our heads? Okay, there's a thing called the truth assumption error, and that just simply says there's only one truth, and that's my truth. Okay, so that just simply means my little world is all there is. Other people might have different viewpoints, but their problem is they just don't understand it yet, right? Kind of in brackets, from my perspective, from my point of view. That's the truth assumption error. So you assume that you've got the facts. The facts are pretty clear. The interpretation of those facts are pretty straightforward. Therefore, this is the interpretation of the facts. The intention assumption error, something else. We assume that we know what the other party wanted to get right in terms of what they did. Okay, so we assume we know what their intentions were. And again, 99% of the time, we are wrong with those things. Okay, and then the blaming error is the common one that we all know. And that is, we just go into this kind of a discussion wanting to figure out who screwed up. Okay, so who can I fire, or who can I demote, or who can I fine, or whatever the case might be. That simply are some of the errors that we make as we approach difficult conversations, just from a factual perspective. Okay, so rather ask, why did this go wrong? Not who screwed up, therefore it went wrong. Okay, ask things like, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again in future? How do we move from certainty, being certain about that set of facts, as I suggested to you, that truth assumption error? How do I move from that to a perspective of curiosity, where I really want to understand a different viewpoint from somebody else? Okay, and if you have a curiosity about knowing something more about yourself, that is a really, really cool way of looking at a difficult conversation. Okay, some thoughts and tips. Be polite and respectful always whenever you're going to have a difficult conversation like this. Okay, realizing that even very good friends can agree to disagree and move on. Okay, you and I might be big mates. We've come a long, long way, but we still differ on certain fundamental aspects in life, right? Like, for example, what's your opinion of the death penalty? What's your opinion of canned lion hunting, right? Those are contentious issues. Those are sensitive issues. We might have very different viewpoints on both of those, but we can still, in an adult fashion and in a respectful way, agree to disagree on a specific topic. Okay, and then separate intent from impact. You don't know what the other person's intent was. You just experience, if you want, the impact on you And you also need an opportunity at some point in time to actually explain to the other person what that impact was on you, and maybe even what your intent was with what you did in the specific situation. Okay. The feeling story is all about the emotions that you go through. Okay. If you deny your feelings, guys, that feeling of uncertainty, that feeling of distrust or mistrust, that feeling of fear, if you want, in terms of, could this be the thing that kills this relationship? Those feelings, if you don't have those feelings, they are going to have you. And denying those feelings, as I say there, is like watching an opera without the music. Okay. Difficult conversations by their nature, guys, is about feelings. Okay. Goes a little step further. It's about feelings and identity. Whose identity? My identity. Okay. And feelings are typically difficult to talk about. I don't know about the ladies on the call. You girls have proven time and time again that you are good or much, much better than us males in expressing your feelings and sharing your feelings with a trusted mate. And that way you actually get the stuff off your chest, right? Us males, we just don't do that, okay? We don't talk about feelings. I mean, it doesn't work like that. We talk about sports and hunting and meat and, facts and things that, that are factually based, okay? But in terms of the feelings story, please spend time and please make it your mission, if you want, to get good at feeling your emotions in your body, getting familiar with them, and then doing something about them. Otherwise, if you don't have your feelings, they will have you. What does that really mean? It just simply means, guys, you keeping your feelings inside and never ever expressing them or addressing them, if you want, will in the end result in some form of unease or dis-ease. Okay, it's a simple fact. So deal with your own feelings and emotions. The identity story part is really, really the foundation of it. Okay. If, for example, somebody challenges you in a boardroom and a meeting about, let's say they challenge you about a mistake on a spreadsheet, you made a mistake on a spreadsheet, what does that mean from an identity perspective? If you're not careful, that kind of a challenge in a boardroom immediately goes to my identity, right? Is this person saying that I'm incompetent? Is this person saying I can't do math, right? Can you see where this is going? It might be a subtle challenge, but immediately that goes to my self-image, my self-doubt, my feelings about myself and my feelings about my own worth and my own level of competence, if you want, all right? We always seem to be very concerned about what do other people think about me, right? Got a little secret to share with you tonight. Other people spend much, much, much less time, thinking time, talking time about you and me than we ever thought, okay? The bottom line is, I almost want to say to you, other people really don't care about you. They do not spend time thinking about you, your issues, your competence, your dress, your whatever, okay? So stop worrying about that, I think, is the message, okay? You need to, through practice, guys, get good at dealing with difficult conversations. That's your mission if you are willing to commit to it, right? Understanding your own identity, understanding how a comment in a boardroom like that could be challenging your identity, just simply becoming aware of that is the very first step and is a huge step forward. Awareness for me is the absolute first step in any of these things. So if you can become aware of, for example, your intention with what happened in the incident that leads to this difficult conversation, the impact of what the other person did on you, the feelings you go through, plus how this thing is potentially attacking or threatening, if you want, your identity. You are moving forward in leaps and bounds, okay? And the more you do this, the better you will get at it, okay? If you decide, right, I gave you that little checklist that says in these cases do have a difficult conversation, in other cases don't, right? If there's an issue that you decide not to have the difficult conversation about and you let it go, okay, does not mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you give up, okay? It just means that through that process of preparing, for example, for a difficult conversation, you also realize that you are not this conflict. You are not this issue, okay? And you also realize that just like me, all other people out there are also not perfect. They are just trying their damn best, like all of us, okay? I can't change you. I can't change my wife. I can't change my mother-in-law. I can only do my best, right? And I can only go into a difficult conversation having prepared for it, doing my best. All right. That little caption at the bottom is quite telling. There's no such thing as a diplomatic hand grenade, okay? A hand grenade is a hand grenade. But what that refers to in terms of difficult conversations is if we kind of walk past the other person and drop a sniper in terms of the difficult conversation that we know we should be having or the issue that happened, but we then just carry on walking, for example. That's me dropping a supposed diplomatic hand grenade, okay? I almost kind of push towards having this difficult conversation, but then I pull back, all right? So please don't do that. If you decide not to have the difficult conversation because of your preparatory process, because you might realize that the issue really sits with you, then don't pull a diplomatic hand grenade on the other party, okay? Just let it go and let it be. Another little life insight that I've learned over the years as well is that sometimes you decide not to have a difficult conversation. You just decide to take a deep breath and think through, as I suggested earlier on, what are the other options for me in terms of addressing this situation? Can I change my approach? Can I change my perspective? Can I change my behavior, right? And in that process, the issue tends to sort itself out, okay? So there are many a time instances in this life where while you are thinking through this and while you are actually preparing to have a difficult conversation, the difficult conversation tends to figure itself out. So that's another little tip of insight or advice, if you want. Having a difficult conversation doesn't mean that I all of a sudden am now going to be super confident and I'm going to have all these discussions about pay rises and about promotions and about, people doubting my competence in the boardroom. No, it's not going to take all of that stuff away. But what it will do is it will reduce my stress and my levels of fear. It'll increase my levels of confidence, guys. Okay. I will feel better about myself. I will feel better about me dealing, for example, with conflict in the workspace. Okay. So again, I'm saying to you, the more you do this, the better you will get at it. But it won't take away all of that fear, anxiety, and mistrust that we typically experience. Okay. That's unfortunately, but that's reality. So a possible solution to all of this, and I'm going to step you through the preparatory process just now, is to just consider your own stance. If your stance is, like I said in an earlier slide, if your stance is to get even, right, or to just give your opinion because somebody else has to listen to you, right, please consider changing that attitude or approach or viewpoint if you want, and change that to a learning stance. What does that mean in practice? It just simply means that I prepare and I go into a difficult conversation wanting to really learn from the other party. I really want to learn a couple of things from the other party. Okay, I want to learn what was their intent. Okay, what was the impact of what I did in this specific situation? What was the impact of what I did on them? Right, and I would like to share what was the impact on me of what they did. Right, that's a learning stance. If you can then move right on to a place where you can start coming up with possible solutions to prevent this from happening again, then you're really in that learning stance. Okay, so that's a possible solution. Okay, couple of steps, and I've got this all nicely summarized for you. Question your own approach or your own stance or your own viewpoint, as I've just suggested, and then go through a process of preparation, and I'll talk you through the whole process now. Then check your purposes, and as I suggested, if your purposes are to drop a hand grenade or to get even or to just shout or anything like that, please don't do this, right? And then whenever you start the discussion with somebody else, this difficult conversation, always start from the third story and then go to their story, and then, only then, do you go to your story. Okay. There's that famous saying that says, try to understand before you try and explain yourself or try to be understood by the other party. All right. So always start from the third story, then listen to their story, and only then offer your story. And then the last little step in that process is go into a space where you can actually come up with options with this other party to actually make sure that this doesn't happen again in future. Okay. Does that make sense, guys? Before I go into this thing now. Just want to stop here for a moment. Thoughts, comments, ideas, questions? Carrington, you'll have to help me.
Carrington, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. There are no comments on the chats. The only Litabo says, I love letting it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the
Okay.
latest comment we have. The other one, which is there, applies to your previous question.
Okay, cool.
And yeah,
Let
so
me-
colleagues, if you have any questions, please pop in the chat. Then I can, if Shag is taking a breath, then we can discuss your questions, contributions. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to use this metaphor, guys, briefly to just explain to you how decision-making works and how we kind of get the results that we get in life. All right. If you can think of an iceberg like this, right? Normally, 90+% of this thing is actually under the water. Okay. You only see a small little bit of it above the waterline. It's akin to how we as human beings operate, right at the bottom of the iceberg over here. I have got those things that you can refer to as values, beliefs, and principles. What are those? Those are the things that I learned through life. And just some news to all of you, if you don't know it yet, from the ages of 0 to roughly around 7 years old, your brain, right, the human brain, is in a very specific state. It mostly operates in the theta state. What does that mean? It just simply means that that is the programmable state of the brain. Okay, so from your birth to the age of roughly 7 years old, you get programmed as a human being. What does that mean? You look at mom, you look at dad, you look at granny, you look at your teachers, you look at your friends, you look at the rest of the family, and you learn what life is all about. In that process, you develop or form or shape your own reference from the perspective of values, beliefs, and principles. Okay, so what is right and wrong? What is good? What is not good? How is life lived? For example, let's get practical, right? How do you treat people of a different gender? How do you treat people who are more senior in years than you are, right? How does fire work? That's a simple thing, right? So those are the fundamental things that you get taught as a kid from 0 to roughly 7, and then you form your own values, beliefs, and principles. Think of that almost as a filter that decides what data comes into your mind, into your central processing unit, if you want, your brain, for processing. Okay, so it's a filter that we each have. That filter of ours causes our perspective or our viewpoint, right? So I see something, I hear something. I immediately refer that back to my values, beliefs, and principles. I test it at that filter. Okay, that then generates within me a thinking process that typically takes place in the prefrontal cortex. That's the rational part of your brain. Once that is taking place, emotions are stirred up within my body. Okay, and you can literally feel these things as you start getting better and better at this, right? So my thoughts and my emotions will then get me to a place which is on the waterline, and I call that the moment of truth. That's where you make a choice. All right. So remember, you see or hear something, you've got values, beliefs, and principles that you test that data at. You then go through a rational process, you go through an emotive process, and then you make a choice on the waterline. You make a choice to do something or not do something. That's the behavior or the action. Whatever you do or not do will then give you an outcome or a result. Okay. That's how the process works. And yes, you guessed it. It's actually a closed loop process. So whatever the result is, that result will again build my values, beliefs, and principles and either confirm them or deny them. Let me give you a very practical example. When I got married for the first time, I believed that you get married once in your life, and this is a fairy tale, and this thing is going to last forever, right? Values, beliefs, principles. Can you hear that? When I got divorced, right, The outcome or the result was not what my values, beliefs, and principles were expecting. Okay. Therefore, the outcome or the result kind of denies almost my values, beliefs, and principles, just from a practical perspective. So that's how decision-making works. And that's how values, beliefs, and principles actually impact on what we do and how we do it on a daily basis. Okay, we can go into a load of detail on this one, but we've got limited time tonight. But that's more or less how human beings make decisions and how what you were taught from the ages of 0 to 7 impacts your life. Remember that on the long run, all these decisions you make cause the outcomes or the results in your life. If you add all those little bits and pieces of result and outcome, that becomes your life, guys. In the end, that becomes your destiny. Okay, so it's serious stuff. All right, here's the little preparation sheet that I'm leaving with you. And there's the 5 steps at the bottom. So the story goes like this. Give the story a name, right? Right up at the top in the left-hand corner, and then start going through your story. Okay, the top half of the page is essentially your story. The bottom half of the page is essentially the other person's story. Okay, but all of this, remember, as preparation, is from your perspective. So write down the factual story, the what happened story in this little block here that says, what is my story? All right. Write down honestly and truthfully. Remember, nobody's going to see this. It's only for you. What were my intentions with what I did? Okay. Whatever the situation was, let's say I was threatened in the boardroom by a colleague of mine regarding the mistake I made, therefore my competence. What was the impact on me? The impact on me was that I felt as if my competence was taken into judgment. Okay. What did I contribute to the problem? Who? Now here, you really need to get honest with yourself. The more honest you are in this process of preparation, the better the result you will get. Okay. Moving on to the right-hand side, what feelings did you experience during this incident, during this what happened? And then, what does this do for my identity? Do exactly the same for the other person's story. What was his or her story? Remember, this is from your perspective. You haven't spoken to this person yet. So this is all preparation, okay? What is his or her story, right? The facts according to them. What do you think were their intentions? What do you think was the impact of what you did on them, okay? What do you believe they contributed? Normally, this little block is too small, right? Because they caused it, right? They screwed it up. And then you are ready to have this discussion or not. Okay, remember that the process is go through this preparation, check your purposes and decide whether or not you should be having this discussion or not, right? And then when you do have the discussion, make sure that your preparation was well done, but then start from the third story, then explore their story, then explore your story or tell your story if you want, and then move into a place where you can start problem solving. If you allow me, I'll just want to take like 2 more minutes to illustrate this whole process at the hand of those 2 examples I gave you. My story here, that professional story of mine, was I put my real hours on the timesheet. What seems to be the problem, right? My intention was I just want to reflect the hours I spent on the project. Okay. In terms of my colleague or my boss's story, okay, what was his or her story? He said to me, no, you can't book 14 hours a day. You've got to book 8 hours a day. Okay. What did I believe their intention was? They want to screw me over. Okay. I'm being honest with you guys here. What was the impact on them? I don't believe there was any impact on them. What was the impact on me? Okay. This thing has cheesed me off, and this thing is kind of challenging my integrity, right? Can you hear how that goes to identity, to the identity level? Okay. What did he or she contribute? Now, just tongue in cheek, I think he caused the problem. Okay. What did I contribute? Of course, I contributed nothing, right? But guys, go into this in depth and be honest with yourself. What did I contribute to the problem? Okay. I didn't check beforehand what the convention was. Okay. I didn't check beforehand, for example, what this timesheet was used for. I made assumptions. Okay. A whole bunch of them. Okay. And then go through the feelings. I felt things like anger, right? I felt things like irritation. I felt things like judgment. In terms of my identity, I felt as if my identity was being threatened by this whole thing that happened. Okay. So that's how you go through the process of preparation. Now you've prepared. Now remember, what is step 2? check your purposes, and then decide whether or not you want to raise this with that other party. If my purposes here was to get even with the guy, what did I suggest before? Don't have the discussion. Okay. I had to change my approach, my view, my stance from that to a stance of learning. Okay. I really wanted to understand what's the story here? Why is he being difficult, right? And then I went into the discussion. I did start from the third story and explain that to him. I then did move into exploring his story, and only then did I share my story. Okay. And we very, very quickly got to problem solving and sorted out the issue. The issue was, let me just give you 1 or 2 pointers. Okay. His intention was just simply effective and successful project management, plus the streamlined invoicing process. All right. What was the impact on him? This was an additional burden that was lumped on top of his already full diary and millions of things he had to do as a project manager, right? That was the impact on him. I didn't realize that. Okay. So his intention that I thought was just to cause trouble in my life was not that. Okay. His intention was just simply to keep to the convention, keep to the book, and make invoicing simple at the end of the month. That's it. Okay. So as we went through this discussion, I realized that one assumption that I made is that timesheets are used for resource allocation, okay, and the loading of resources on a project. That was the wrong assumption to make. There's another tool for that. Timesheets are not used for that, okay. So that was the kind of thing that came out of my process of preparation and me having this discussion with a colleague. So just sharing with you guys in terms of, this is a structured process, a structured way in which you can, first of all, identify that difficult conversation that you have to go and have, right? You can prepare for it. And in that process of preparation, guys, a whole lot of times, what we realize, if we're really honest, is that the problem sits in this little box over here that says contribution. What did I contribute to the problem? Okay. Another quick example is I had a challenge with my son who didn't phone his mother often enough once he left the home. And just to illustrate that point, what I realized when I did my preparation before I had the discussion with my son was that I contributed mostly to this problem because I kept on threatening him, kept on suggesting to him that I pay for his cell phone, therefore I expect him to phone his mother. Okay. So many a time, what you realize in this preparatory process is that the problem really lies with me. You realize that? Think through the other options I gave you way earlier in this discussion when I suggested, is there a different way you can do this? Can you change your approach? Can you change your viewpoint? Can you change your behavior? And 99% of the times, the answer to all those questions is yes. Here's a summary of what I just discussed, guys, just to make it easy for you guys. Use this previous little sheet if you want in future to actually go through this process and to really get good at it, right? There's the summary. And then just to comment or to note that you can use exactly the same process with conflict within a team and use exactly the same principles to deal with that. And then lastly, just the reference. This is what the book looks like. I think there's another, there's another print out. It doesn't look like this anymore. There's a blue one, a dark blue one. There's a light blue one. But please, if you want to go and acquire this book, just look for the one that's written by Stone, Patton, and Heen, because there are at least 2 other books that I'm aware of with exactly the same title, but they're not the same process. Okay. So guys, that's where I think our time allows us to get to. Are there any questions or thoughts?
Thank you very much, Jacques. We've got a comment from Zweletu saying, solving the problem is more important to me. I do an introspection and later address the issue. So some of the questions that we prepared is that how can one improve the skill, especially when they're dealing with a difficult stakeholder?
You can improve this. You can improve the skills simply by, first of all, remember I said, what's the very first thing? You need to become aware of the issue, right? Once you've identified the issue with the difficult stakeholder relationship, go through the process of preparation. That really is how you are going to improve your skill. And then, of course, once you're ready, you've thought it through, and you know that your purposes are appropriate, then go have the discussion. Okay. And as you have more and more of these discussions, you get better at it. Okay. I've had these discussions with my wife. I've had these discussions with my mother-in-law, as I suggested. I've had these discussions with my kids, and those are probably some of the most difficult ones. Okay. But as you have them more and more, you get better and better at it. Okay. The whole issue that I shared in terms of sharing feelings or emotions, I don't know about you other guys on this call, but I'm still learning. Okay. And I have a thing that I share on leadership development programs called an emotion wheel. Don't know if you can see this, but anyways, it's just a little wheel that helps me verbalize my feelings. Okay. Because I'm not good at it. I wasn't born good with it. It's a skill that I have to develop over time. And I must admit, I've become damn good at it over the years. But it's a decision you make to get better at it. Okay.
Okay.
Hope that helps.
Awesome. We've got a hand from Portia, and then we'll take Carrington. Portia, can go ahead.
Thanks for that. My question is, how do you recommend one deals with just the navigation of a leader, obviously being at the position of power, and that repetitively sort of, demonstrate that bad behavior towards staff? You find courage to address the issue in the most politeful manner and give feedback.
Yeah.
But that type of behavior keeps popping up, obviously with the challenges around escalation and all of that. What would be your top of mind sort of addressing that when it's repetitive?
Okay. As you go through that process of preparation, right, I suggested that you've got your set of facts, he or she has got his set of facts, because this is now about a relationship that you believe is not functional, okay, or could be improved. So what does this all boil down to? This boils down to what is the impact of what he is doing on you, right? Getting to understand what his intention is, all right? And then what he contributed and what I contributed to the same story. So I would go through the process of preparation, and then I would ask for an opportunity to share this discussion with that specific person. And this takes courage, guys. This really takes courage, but it's well worth your while. And all I then want to get to is explain the supposed assumption around the facts of the story. Remember, start with the third story and then ask him to tell his story, right? And then you need to get to a place where you can explain the impact of what is happening on you. Okay. If the impact is that you're being, how would I put this? If you're being kind of victimized or belittled or whatever in public, then that's the impact of what he or she is doing on you. And you need to get to a place where you actually explain that to the person. Okay. Now, there's a couple of other things you need to also take into consideration. What's the typical leadership style of this person? All right. And what is the culture like in the organization that we're talking about? Okay. If the culture is not conducive to openness, vulnerability, authenticity, if you want, it's going to be challenging, right? And if the leadership style of this specific person is traditional, old style S1 kind of, leadership, which is really management couched as leadership, right? Then it's going to be difficult. So from an observation and preparation perspective, I would also, if I was you, I would also try and understand both the culture and the leadership style of this specific person. And then that, in the end, will help me clarify whether or not it's worth my while to actually go and have this discussion. Okay. But I would encourage you to at least attempt it at least once. Hope that helps a little bit.
Portia, I would like to follow up, or you're fine?
Thank you for that, Jacques.
Okay, cool. Carrington?
Thanks, Petunia. Thanks, Shaq, for the insightful presentation. But I hold a slightly different view. In a real life situation in the work environments, dealing with issues might not really, might not be possible to follow that linear approach, well structured, with the straightforward relationships. There are assumptions embedded in this. For instance, I can give an example to say, when you get to the point of raising the issue, the assumption is the other stakeholder is willing and will participate.
Yeah.
What if the other party turn down your proposal to discuss the issue? You hit a
Then it's
snag in the process.
Yeah. Then it's impossible to have the discussion. It's
Yeah.
that simple. It's impossible to have the discussion, which means whatever the issue is, it will stay and it will foster and it's going to explode at some point in time. That's the simple reality.
Yes, and then the second alternative is people get into this conversation without being friend, but with other motives
Yes.
hidden behind. So the conversations that we have up to the point of reaching the solution are not frank. Therefore, the outcome is flawed.
How about then having a discussion about hidden agendas?
But then my views will be touching on the needs of because you see, in organizations, there are power struggles. There are a lot of things that come into play. Power struggles, survival strategies, and the list goes on. All those things come into play, come in the middle of real work. Perhaps not everyone is objective, but it happens.
Correct. And not
Organizations.
everyone that is in a leadership position necessarily understands this stuff, guys. We make the assumption that they do, but 99% of the time we are wrong with that. So yeah, I understand what you say. What I am, however, saying is that, yes, I understand we live in a real world. Okay, I have the same issues every single day, but it doesn't mean that I can't at least go through the process of preparation. Remember what I said, the first step is awareness, right? One of the purposes of having difficult discussions or preparing for difficult conversations is learning about myself as well, right? So remember what I said, emotions and identity. Is there maybe an issue in terms of my own identity that I need to address? I don't know, but that could be the benefit. Even if you just go through the process of preparation and not even have the discussion because the culture is not conducive for it, or this guy's leadership style is just so abrupt and abrasive and non-accommodating that you just simply can't have a decent conversation with this person. Then in the end, guys, I'm sorry to say this, but then in the end, you might have to make serious decisions in terms of, are you spending your life in the right place? Okay. Just a thought. That's really on the far end of the continuum, but that is something that you then need to consider or contemplate. Same with relationships, right? Intimate relationships.
Okay, and then we have a follow-up question that links to what Carrington asked. This is from Itumiling Matsidi. So she says that I feel I often get told I'm emotional when you have to get this difficult conversation. How does one isolate emotions and communicate effectively?
Okay, that little process says figure out what happened, conversation, right? Then go through the impact on you, their intent, okay, what you caused in terms of this whole situation, and then we get to the feelings conversation. Remember, go and sit with yourself and feel those feelings, right? And then get back to the whole process and see how does that then attach or focus on my identity. That might help you through that process to be then less emotional if you want, because then you can park the factors, you understand them from the feelings that you've had. If you only allow yourself to have those feelings for the first time in the difficult conversation, I think that would be dangerous and risky. So go and practice it before the time. Feel the feelings and then decide, what am I going to do with this, right? Try to see if you can make the link between the feelings and your identity. In other words, what's your issue? right, in terms of that emotional process. Some of us have got a much more emotional way of expressing themselves, and that's perfectly fine, right? But just to say that somebody is emotional, in my mind, guys, is a clear leadership cop-out. Okay. I don't understand how whatever happened impacts that person that is supposedly emotional, right? So I think it's an easy way out for leadership to skirt the issue or to avoid the issue. That's my view. But as you go through this process of preparation and as you feel your own feelings, you will get better at dealing with those things and maybe then come across as being less emotional in a discussion like this.
Yeah. All right. Then we've got a question from Annalisa, says that how do you treat a scenario where you are open to have a conversation, but the other party is avoidant?
Yeah, that typically happens in intimate relationships as well, right? And it also happens in boss subordinate kind of relationships. I would again suggest go through your own preparation and then just keep on requesting an opportunity to have a discussion about this issue. If it becomes more and more important, let's say this is a professional issue, right? It's an issue at work. If this issue becomes more and more important for the business, for its survival and its thriving in the industry, then at some point in time, leadership is not going to have an option any longer than to have the discussion. Okay. But if the other person is not willing to talk about it, then there's a problem. Okay. Especially in intimate relationships.
Carrington, I note your hand. Just want to wrap up with the comments. We've got Nosipa that says that thank you for very insightful. I like how you shared the tool that one can use to decide if the conversation should take place. I tend to avoid difficult conversation, so I think that would be really helpful, much appreciated. And then we've got a comment also from Portia saying that some people should remain senior in their own right, but should never have anything to do with leading people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. And
That
then
is the
we've
reality.
also got all the comments just saying that an insightful presentation. So just hand over to Carrington and then we'll wrap up as we are over time. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, I think so. So since this is I would call it a framework or a model or a guideline about difficult conversations. So our point of departure is that the conversations are difficult. So we have other strategies like mediation, which I think if added to the framework, perhaps could add value.
Yeah.
We take into account different scenarios that are encountered when approaching difficult conversations. I think this is my last contribution. Thank you.
I think in the end, Carrington, if you get to that place where, let's say, you want to have this discussion with a specific leader in your organization, and that person refuses to have the discussion, then the back end of the process is there's other tools you can use in the organization typically to almost force that discussion to happen, and that goes to mediation and way beyond that.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrington. Sorry, Petunia, are you going to wrap up for us?
Yes.
All
So
right.
I wanted to wrap up that thank you, Jack, for the insightful presentation. So we've learned that this is a technique that can be centered around problem solving, and it's acknowledgement of our emotional energies. It recognizes that there is magic in conflict. It can be used as a strategic tool for building key relationships in the workplace, and it can be used for solving for the requirements with the stakeholders, as well as if there is a role misalignment. Once again, thank you very much. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have a request.
Yes.
Can you please maybe just for all the participants, give them the two slides, the one that's the summary and the one that's that preparation sheet. Otherwise, there's going to be very little value in you taking something out of this to go forward. And if you want more detail, go get a copy of
Alright.
that book.
Okay, awesome.
Thank
Thank you
you,
very
guys.
much. Thank you so much. It was very insightful. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. And remember to volunteer. If you'd like to volunteer, we can use the previous code that we shared, or you can message us on our on our numbers, or on WhatsApp, on LinkedIn, and everywhere. We are IBSA on YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.